love, hope, and freedom.
It is suffocating to be around so many people. The air feels thick and muted. Their cries sound like the cries of people you know. You wonder, was your mother, your father? All you can care about in times like this is the safety of the people you love. You wonder if there's any point in surviving if you lose love along the way. But love isn't promised. Sometimes you're forced to make a decision that pushes you thousands of miles away from everyone you know. You leave behind the lemon tree in your backyard. You leave behind your father's warm smile. You wonder if there is any kindness in places like this. You long for roads that you knew. You long for home, for people to care.
So Rufescent is our project that we've been working on since last year, 2023, as part of the research competition under the Manara Center in Abu Dhabi. Rufescent is the title of our overall campaign and project in phase 2, but initially it is the title of our graphic novel, meaning tinged with red. Rufescent as a project as a whole is this campaign that pushes for and voices in favor of victims of war and intolerance who are stereotyped against and dehumanized in the media. And through Rufescent, our mission is to not only destigmatize the stereotypes that exist against these victims of war, but it is also to help people understand that victims of war are not just victims. They are people. They're multifaceted, they're fully fleshed out, and there's more to them than just the things that have happened to them. And that is what we wish to do with the narratives that we have written and illustrated in Rufescent.
I split our team into 3 parts. There was the writing department, which was me, and then there was the research department, and then there was the art department.
So we split the story of Rufescent, its narrative, into 3 parts. It's centered around various struggles that these victims faced. Like, for example, in phase 1, it was about displacement. In phase 3, it was about repercussions after fleeing. And phase 2 was about the difficulties that people with disabilities face in the midst of war and intolerance.
The main character from part 1 is Sana, the 7-year-old girl who has a little brother. Her 2 parents tried to get her on the last train to evacuate the region they're in.
We are research team 1, where we focused on researching content based on story number 1, which is focused on Sana's story. And I think a lot of what we wanted to do, a lot of the stuff that happens in the book itself, we wanted it to have like real life correlations, so that the story can seem a little bit more real, a little bit more impactful. For example, a specific instance that we tried to do is the story starts with a panel of a train, and it's just one whole panel, so it shows a huge emphasis, and the whole story is also based around that specific situation with the train, and that also is related to a real life situation in a country that was going through conflict, where that train was used as a method of transportation. However, the lights in that train were often switched off so that the passengers were never so the passengers wouldn't get noticed by opposing countries, or just so that they could avoid any kind of harmful intention towards them. And we use that in a very indirect but direct way in the stories. For example, Sana and her brother in the train where it was completely dark, and they felt like everyone was watching them, even though they couldn't fully see it. They just felt eyes on them. So stuff like that, stuff like the small metaphors that we used, was heavily influenced by the research that we've also found online.
What do you see when people start forming like a wall against things where like they see it and they're not even affected anymore? What's the word for that? Yeah, apathy. So there's this like huge trend of apathy that exists in social media because you're so bombarded by these like events that are happening, and obviously it's important to keep up with the news, but it's also very easy to fall into these feelings of apathy and just thinking, oh, it happens all the time, like why should I even bother anymore? And I wanted to use these stories as a tool to combat that sense of apathy that was so prevalent in society, especially among school kids, like teenagers. And I wanted to combat that and help build empathy and sympathy. And using real world experiences that was well researched was key for me to accomplish this goal.
The character Angus, we based him off of this real life, like, case study about how disabled people were, not accommodated properly. And we, decided to make him like this early 20s character who feels that he is not being able to provide for his family because he is tied down by his wheelchair and he's amputated because of the war.
There were certain incidents that we wanted to base our stories and characters on. There were incidents like, the bunkers, the war bunkers that are given to, people during war. They are not well equipped for people with wheelchairs or people with canes. So these nuances were kind of things that kind of get lost during media coverage for war as a whole. We don't deny that war doesn't get coverage, but when it does, it kind of blankets and kind of shows these people as, they are victims and that's all. So there were stories of people being left behind because they're disabled, and people had to flee. They had to run from one place to the other when they find out that something's gonna happen in the current location. We wanted to base our story on these kind of experiences, real experiences that people have.
Kinshasa is the most favorite place in this world for me. And when I had to move out to another country for education, it was very heartbreaking because I did not want to leave my home and go to some other place to study. But I knew that I had to do that because I had to get good education, and I know I couldn't get that here. But I do hope that one day I will come back here and do some good things to this country and make better changes here and improve in terms of education and in other ways. No matter how far I am from Congo, the love for Congo will never change in my heart.
Morella is this lady who's just migrated to another country and she's trying to find work. And part 3 is basically about her experiences of social, like, what do you call it?
Integration?
Yeah, her struggles with social integration and sometimes her getting ostracized by people around her. And so a lot of part 3 was based on like us exploring the anxiety and the fear that she felt in the new place. The first page of part 3 is another expansion of a metaphor. It's literally her floating in an ocean. It's like a lush ocean with coral and kelp and everything. And that's because in the writing and very early on in the ideation, we want to play with the idea of her feeling like she was drowning. So we had shown that visually.
As I was doing research for story 3, we see how because of war, drones have their hardships end with war and last a well lot after war, because even as they move into new cities as refugees, they still find it difficult to blend into these new cultures and face a lot of backlash and discrimination by the people in these new countries. And so it's a very important topic that is not really talked about a lot, about the struggles people face after war.
So when I was writing the stories, I made sure to use certain literary devices that could strengthen and heighten our visual elements. So I used a lot of metaphors that would create a sort of atmosphere around the illustrations. You'll see that in the way that these stories get more hopeful as they go from like the first story all the way to the third story. So the first story feels quite hopeless. When it ends, you don't really know whether these characters are going to survive. You don't really know like where this is going. And then in the second story, these characters do survive, but you're thinking at what cost? And then in the third story, it all accumulates to this point where it's like, okay, these characters are happy, you know for sure that they're safe and everything's all right. So the narrative evolves in such a way where it goes from like quite hopeless to hopeful, and it's reflected in the same with the illustrations, with the way that the illustrations go from being quite bleak and black and white to suddenly being like more colorful as the story develops. A lot of the story is written in metaphor, but these metaphors are reflections of people's realities. It's very easy to read the book and think that it's fiction, but fiction derives from reality, and these are the lived experiences of people out there. There's a Sana out there, there's an Angus out there, and there's a Marilla out there who did not get to leave and open up a cafe. They did not get to meet other people who had survived like them and go into support groups and form friendships. They didn't get the future that we got to give these characters. So it's so important to read stories like this and build empathy and keep listening and sharing the stories and experiences of these people, because a lot of the times people in situations like this don't have a voice, and it's so important that you as the audience are their voice.
So we're using social media as a platform to spread awareness and spread our message to our target audience, which is high school students aged 14 to 18, because most people these days use social media, and that's the best way for our message to be reached to our wider audience.
So some of the tactics that we're using is that we're using web weaving as one of the type of content, which basically includes some drawings as well as some metaphorical quotes and poems, and this kind of elevates the storytelling content for our audience, which is our main key point and our main unique point of the project.
We also kind of want to make a platform where people can share their own experiences, like people who go through these specific conflicts. They can talk about their experiences or just share their concerns so that other people, maybe they can feel heard. Or because a lot of media, they focus on very mainstream things, and sadly marginalized communities is not a part of the mainstream media. So we plan to kind of create a platform where these communities can talk, share, express their thoughts, and maybe that could lead into something way bigger in the future.
Right.
We also plan on using our social media page to kind of navigate people to our website, which basically we are going to show a lot of testimonials where people talk about their experiences, a lot of the art that our team has created, a lot more about our characters and the stories that we made, as well as the research that is hidden into those stories but have actually happened in real life.
Well, actually, it gets me back to the Intifada of 2002. It was a curfew here in Palestine, and we were not allowed to go outside our houses. But my middle sister, she was engaged, and we didn't know how long the political situation will extend. So they decided to get married during this conflict. And we remember going out of the house when they said that the curfew is off for a few hours. We rushed to the church. They got married. We had a small party. It was a beautiful hope moment for the family that, okay, life goes on. We have to proceed with our life. This doesn't stop any of us from living. But it was like a special moment. And even it was like within the news, the newspaper, they put their picture that youth are getting married even during the conflict and during the intifada and the curfew here in Bethlehem.
What Lies Under Rubble essentially documents the process behind 8 people working for Rufescent. In phase 1, we had the writer, the research team, the art team. In phase 2, we have the social media team, the documentary team, the art team, and the design team. We are university students who really believe in the message that Rufescent has to give.
It's very easy to forget that it's not just something that's happening to them. They are living through this to the point that a lot of the time it's hard for them to figure out whether it's better to survive through it or whether to just experience some sort of finality. And that's the kind of decision that a lot of people don't have to make in the parts of the world that we live in, but it's something that not many people our age realize or understand, at least not understand to the extent to realize how almost demeaning it makes a person's life. And through Rufescent, with our graphic novel, our social media campaign, and our documentary, we really wanted to show the humanity, the human nature of these people who are so very easily not seen as humans and are just seen as another statistic, another toll in the overall death toll of a war, etc. So that's why Rufescent is so important, because it's more than just a campaign, it's a call to action to feel for these people, even if you don't know them personally.